Hi, Marilyn here, back with Cotton and Chocolate and Wave Pool month 3. So first we're going to talk about our piecing. The first thing that we have to do are make a number of half square triangles, and we're working with fabrics F, fabrics I, and fabrics G and F together to make a variety of half square triangles. So I want to talk about how I do half square triangles using the block lock. Oops, where is it? Well, let's see, here it is. I had moved it up because I was using it. How about that? Okay, so I did make my squares a little bit bigger using a 4 1/4 inch square so that they turn out a little larger. So I think we all know how to do it, putting right sides together. Of course, these are batik, so there's really no right or wrong size. So I paired in this case, a fabric F with a background. And then I use my Quilter's Magic Wand. And if you have one of these, there's just a little line right down the middle. So I put that little line from point to point. And then always take a thin pencil. So this is a sew line pencil. And then I just mark a line, a thin line on each side. And then I sewed on that line, and then you just cut down from point to point, either, well, I've done this a lot, so I just kind of freehand it or use a ruler. And then I've always pressing towards the dark. Okay, so you can just use your iron and press towards the dark, pressing that open. Okay, so I've done that with a number of these. In terms of using fabric F, you need 12 of each, and it's going to yield 24 half square triangles. You need 8 fabric eyes and backgrounds to yield 16. And then you need 8 fabric G and 8 fabric I to yield 16 of those half square triangles. So you can see these different ones that I have sitting. This one I have already pieced to something to show you in a minute. Okay, and they're going to turn out too big, so you need to trim these to 3.5 inches. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how I do that using the block lock. Okay, so in this block lock, I was saying earlier that I use a 6.5 inch, so obviously it's a little bit bigger. So when I've and I do have a video, a separate video, if you go to the YouTube available from our homepage. This has what I call a valley and a hill. So the hill is where you've pressed towards, okay? So that's where that seam allowance is going. And so the emblem, block lock, is always in the valley, or the L is always low, okay, on the low side. The L is on the low side, right? Okay, so it's gonna go right in to that seam allowance. So now I want it to be 3.5. So here is my 3.5, and I just put it somewhere in the middle of that cut down, and 3.5 is here. So when I go to the other side, I still have a little bit of cut down. So I'm just going to hold this in and cut down here and here. Now the theory with block lock is that you hold this and spin it and then just slide it down. I find it kind of hard to do that. What I really do is take all of mine, and so if I have 16, I take all of them in the same realm and do all the same thing. I've already cut these down, but put this one down and cut it down, so I'm doing the same step consistently, cut them all down, and then I turn them all this way and turn the emblem, so now it's still in the valley, in the low side, and then slide it down so that it says perfect half and half, and it's sitting in the valley. So now I have this cut down here, right? And then I hold it here and cut it down and cut it down. And look at that, I have a perfect half square triangle with perfect points. And all these I've cut down in perfect half square triangles. So yeah, it is an extra step, but man, my half square triangles are always nice and always perfect points. So I've already cut all of these down to 3.5 inches. So that's how you use the block lock. And it's just a key of having the emblem on the low side. I call it on the valley side. Okay, so that's half square triangles. So you got to get all those made first and get those out of the way. Let me get this. And then the next step is going to make that square in a square. So that goes right in the middle here. So there's our half square triangles in the points here, and we're going to use them in our other block as well. And then we have to make this square in a square. Okay, so what you need are both of your 6.5 inch center blocks and our 3.5 inch square background blocks. Okay, so traditionally you would do this, and I'm going to show you a non-traditional way, of course, because you know that's how I roll. You would take your pencil and you would mark point to point, and they flip up like this to make your first corners, and you always do the opposite corners first and press them. So you would sew on that line, cut your 1/4 inch, and flip it up. So instead, I use the folded corner clipper. And everybody that knows me knows that I love, love, love the folded corner clipper. Use it for a million things, but these connector corners is what it's made for. But I also use them to make bindings, attach bindings, and finish bindings. So I'm going to line that up at my 3.5, and I'm going to cut this off. And you can stick a pin in it to hold it before you sew it. But what it did is it cut that edge off, left a little line, and then it leaves you your 1/4 inch. So you don't draw a line. I just drew a line to show you the initial one. And I would cut this side off too. And I would do it for my other ones also. Stick a pin in it and then sew it. And I already did it for the other one, just a demo. Press it towards a triangle. Now you add on your opposite square. So I'm going to line this up. And I love it because it eliminates that drawing. It eliminates the sewing, the cutting, and the folding over. It's just one cut. And it's always perfect. So I'm going to line that up. And you are going to cut through that previous triangle. That's why you do these first. Cut through it, and then you can add a pin there. So I do opposite sides, and then I'll sew them. And then turn this, add your other square. Put your ruler here, and then it just lines up on the 3.5. Point in your 3.5. Cut that. And it's lined up perfectly. And then I would do it for the other squares once I had these sewn. So you press those out. Once I had that sewn, you press that out. And that's your square in a square. And what's nice about that ruler, oh, here's my kitty to come visit. Once I have that sewn, it's a perfect 1/4 inch right there. So that's your square in a square. And next we're going to be moving on to making our flying geese. Okay, so now we're going to be working on making our flying geese using our wing clipper. And in this case, we're going to be using our white background and for the first set of instructions, and our fabric F. So I'm going to be taking 2 background 7.5 inch squares and 8 of our fabric F 4 inch. But to make one set that results in 4 flying geese, you need 1 background, 7.5 background, and 4 of these 4 inch. So before I get started, and I do have my kitty helping me, you'll see him kind of in the background here. I take my magic wand and I draw my lines before I get going on all 4 of my squares. So that helps get going because you're going to need that drawn for sewing. Okay, and if you can't see that, like I have 2 of these pens, one's that has white lead. So if you can't see your dark lead, you might need one with white lead just to see, you know, it depends upon what you need. Sometimes you can see it depends upon what lead you can see. But in any case, when you line these squares up, you need to scooch them in just a little, like maybe 1/8 of an inch or a little bit less. You can't line them up right even with the outside. You have to scooch it in just a little, so you can see my scooch in, and I've pinned it, and on the other side. But when you line these up, the lines should match. And then you're going to sew exactly on the line all the way through. Okay? And then you're going to sew that, and you're going to cut right down the middle. Okay? Cut it apart. And then you're going to take your pins out, of course, and you're going to press towards the small triangles. So I'm just kind of finger pressing because I don't have my iron set up here. But all 4 of these, all 2 of these, you're going to press towards your triangle, okay? Now, with your other 2 squares, you're going to take that square. So here's my next sample, is you're going to take that and you're going to add that to here. And that little line should match up exactly with that point. So you're going to scooch that in a little bit, and that should line up. And you're going to sew exactly on that line with these 2. And once you have that sewn, you're going to cut it with your ruler right here from point to point, and open that up. Oh my gosh, look, a flying geese, a goose. 1, 2, and then you'd have the other one, 3, 4. 4 flying geese. And you're going to do that with the other set, and that's how you end up with 8. Okay, so I have these pressed and finished, and now you have to cut these down, and it said they should measure 3.5 to 6.5 by 6.5 inches raw, right? So this is where the ruler comes in. So we have in here 6.5 inches by 3.5. So the first thing you're going to do is line this up. There's a little V notch in here, and that V is going to line up hopefully with your V. Okay? And you should have, it's a kind of a scant cut down. So you're just going to cut that down, the side and the top, and then you're going to turn it around and then line the bottom up with the 6.5. And then what I love about her rulers is there's a second matchup. So there's this little X right here, and that at the 3.5 at the top, and that should go right in your V at the top. So I have my 6.5 by my 3.5 at the bottom, the notch at the top, and then I'll just cut it down. So some of mine have a little bit bigger cut down, and some this is kind of a small cut down. And I have my perfect flying geese block, and it's a perfect 1/4 inch right here. So I have 2 of these cut down. Once I press this, I would cut these, get this pressed open, and then I get these cut down. And kind of like all my other things that I do, I actually cut all 8 in this direction first. I'll cut it this side here, cut it down, cut this side, layer it, and then turn them all and do this side. I like to do things consistently so I get really accurate and remember what I'm doing. Okay? I get all those cut down. So that's how my flying geese work. All right. So you're going to make those with your background, 2 background 7.5 inch square and 8 4-inch squares of F. And then you're going to come down here. You need to make the opposite side. You need 4 7.5 inch rectangles of F and 16 4-inch squares of background for your flying geese. And it says it right here. Okay. So that's going to make 4, or you're going to make 16 flying geese for the bottom one. So you'll make double. Okay. So that one looks like this. So you make double of those, okay? So once you get done with that, then we're going to be putting our blocks together. Okay, now that we have all of our components made, our flying geese, our half square triangles, we're ready to put our blocks together. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your flying geese that have your solid background, your white geese here that look like this, and you need to take and make 4 sets of 3 and sew these together like this, okay? And when I sew these together, I always sew them so that I see this seam facing up and I can see this intersection. And you don't want to sew right on this intersection, because if you do, you often will lose that point. So you want to sew just right to the right towards the raw edge of that intersection so that you don't lose that point, okay? And then where those, and you're going to put these aside. These are right here in the quilt. So even though you see 4 of them, 1 of them is from another block, but 3 of them will be a part of this piecing. Okay, so you're going to set those aside. All right, so we have that taken care of. And then you're going to take 2 of them and piece them side by side. Okay, and you need 2 sets of those. So 4 sets of them flying and 2 more sets side by side. Okay, and that should use up all of those flying geese. And then you're going to lay out the rest of your blocks. So you have 2 of these blocks that look like this. Your center, your other flying geese flying in, and then you have half square triangles, and these are all the same fabric, all right? So now you're going to get ready to piece these together. So the first thing you're going to do is probably piece this center, and then you can piece these and these. Now, notice that you have an intersection here and here. So, you know, typically you lay these together. I would not just what I call sew these blindly, meaning not pin them, because the chance of these points matching isn't great, okay? And you have high contrast fabric, so if they don't match, you're really going to see it. So I highly suggest that you pin them. And how I do this is I first take a pin. So I call this precision piece pinning. And I take my pin and I haven't cut down this flying geese. So I'm going to do this with one that I've actually cut down for the demo. I'm going to put a pin right through here so that I see this point exactly and I see this point exactly. Okay. And I'm going to put these through so that it's completely perpendicular and hold that like that so that they're really held together. Those points are matching perfectly. Then I'm going to take one pin from one side and I'm going to go below it, in and out. So basically it's holding that pin perpendicular, but when I sew it, it's kind of a cushion so that I won't ruin my needle in my machine. And then I'm going to go on the other side, go in and out. So I have these 2 pins holding it. I got some thread sitting there, but it's holding this pin perpendicular. So now I'm going to sew. I'm going to really slow down. When I get close, I'm going to slow down. And the second before I get to this pin, I'm going to pop it out. My needle's going to go right into that hole and hopefully be perfect. And I'm pretty successful at that, to get a really perfect intersection. Now, I'm not really worried about hitting these pins because I've created this cushion. I'm not right at the intersection. I'm below the fabric and out, so I have this cushion of fabric and I'm going really slow. So I generally don't hit these pins and I'm going very slow. And then I pull these out. So is it an extra step? Yes, but it's usually pretty darn accurate, okay? Does it take extra time? But boy, if you don't get it, you have to pull this out and try it again. And that's time, and every time you pull it out, you stretch the fabric a little bit. So you have to be really careful with that. So try that if you haven't. I know everybody that I suggested to has pretty good success with it, but you really want these points to match, because if they don't, it's very obvious. So give that a try if you haven't before, and hopefully that will work for you. Okay, so you need to do that on all these corners when you put them together. Okay, now the next thing that you have is you have 2 of these blocks, and then you have your 2 outside points here to put on the end once you finish. So your block looks like this. You have 2 of these blocks, and that's this outside block right here. Okay, and of course you're going to save those for later once you get those together. And there's no matching on this one. That's kind of nice. So there's your block there, and you do have arrows for pressing. So it shows you pressing, which is nice. Okay, and then we have 1 more block to put together, so let's get on to that. Okay, and now we're making our last block for this month. Phew! Okay, there's 4 of them. So it's all the final pieces that we have left. And so we're making this cute pinwheel in the middle, so we'll start with that. So you're going to lay out your 4 blocks. So you got to make 4 so you can layer all 4 on top and make those. Piece that together, and when I iron it, I kind of, you know, clip that and make that little spin in the middle so it lays nice and flat. So you can go ahead and do that. Lay those out. Got to get 4 of those, and then you can lay all your pieces out to make the rest of it. The block is right here, so you're going to make 2 of those, and it's funny because when you piece that together, that's the outside corner, which makes that other what looks like a flying geese, but it's actually just the edge of those blocks there when you piece the quilt together. So lay this out, and then you have your half square triangle sitting here, and then 4 3.5 inch white squares, and then your outside triangles. So lay these out, layer them up in 4. You should have nothing else left to piece in. You should use everything else that you cut. Hopefully it's all gone. And so it's pretty easy to piece together. I piece these together in pairs, so I have that set. And then you can piece that into your quilt this way, piece that in. You have this paired together. You can piece all these 4 and these 4 together, and then add that to that edge and add that to that edge. Okay, so it's a very easy block to put together. No tricky points or anything to watch, except for, you know, your center right there. So you have all those 4, and again, you're going to save these blocks for piecing later. And then once we move into month 4, you'll start seeing some things that we can start putting together for your center. But actually, now that you have the flying geese done, you could actually put, because you made these and these, you have your center done, and you have these, you could actually piece the flying geese and your middle together, which I was excited about that, and I actually did that once I made those flying geese. You can actually get that middle piece together if you look, you know, at the back of your book, and it shows you piecing, which I did jump ahead, and you can kind of see, you know, in your quilt assembly, you can kind of see that center right here. You can see those waves that you made last month in that little set of 3 flying geese, and you can get that piece together now once you have those flying geese done. So you can go ahead and get that done, and that's really fun to see that part of it. So you're ready to do that as well now. Okay, have fun this month. Enjoy the quilt and those beautiful fabrics, and we'll see you for month 4. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.